Welcome to Behind the Play, a video and podcast product of The Hoop Show that looks to share some stories and the journey of past players, current players, and the people off field that help keep us Geelong strong. My name is Paul James, and today I have the great pleasure in episode 1 of introducing someone who I loved watching play for Geelong and look, even when you played for Brisbane as well. Alan Bundy Christensen, how are you, mate?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you reaching out and getting me on.
No, thrilled to have you on board, mate. So, really looking forward to having a chat. And as I said, like episode 1, I'm stoked that we got someone of your amazing caliber on board, and you've got some really cool stories to share. And I'm looking forward to picking your brain about some of those.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
As we were talking about before the show started, you got a few little nicks and scratches on the face. You've come from a match and from training in consecutive days. You're putting in a power of work. It's awesome stuff, mate.
Yeah. Unfortunately, one of my own teammates decided to kick me in the face yesterday. So
is that the video I saw online earlier today?
Yeah. So unfortunately, yeah, just ran into the bottom of his boot. When you're only 5'9" and he's 6'3", he puts his boot up. Yeah, these things happen. So I'm lucky just to have an eye, to be honest. And got away with it, I think.
Yeah, it's just a couple of little nicks and scratches, and that's it. It could have been a lot worse. So glad to hear that. That wouldn't have made for a great start to any sort of conversation. So as we start to get into things, and before we even focus on when you were first drafted at the club and those sort of things, where did the love of footy first begin? Now, obviously, you've got some family ties to the game that were established before that, but like, were you kind of almost born with a footy in your hand, for want of a better phrase, or did it take a little while? Like, what got you into the game in the first place?
No, I think everyone who knows me and knew me growing up, I was always around the Lara Footy Club. Dad, coached a lot of teams when I was growing up. My uncles were always involved. When I was 8 and 9 and 10 years old, I was around the Geelong Falcons, and Jimmy Bartell, Luke Hodge were running around. It's pretty crazy to think that them sort of players were on the Falcons list, and I had no idea, the sort of players they were going to be, and end up playing with both of them.
Good point. Across both clubs, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. But in terms of playing footy, I was just a kid from Lara. Just loved being around the footy club. And I still have a deep connection for that football club. But coming through the ranks, Auskick, Lara Little League, and then into the junior program. And then, I was just, one of those kids who was always around footy.
Yeah, just always like dagging off someone. You got the footy in your hand, looking for a kick, I'd imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And, growing up, it wasn't about being an AFL player. It was, my goal was to be a Lara senior player.
Yeah.
That's how much I love the club. So, very thankful that I grew up in a pretty supportive environment, and not just in terms of footy, but just everything.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, supportive families and friends and support networks around you are always a really awesome start. But I mean, I guess you mentioned wanting to just play seniors, but was there always, and again, I guess with a family connection there, knowing there's a little bit of a history in that at that level, did you ever, at a young age, let your mind wander to the possibilities that could happen? And obviously, you don't want to get too carried away with yourself. And there's so many people out there that are sharing the same dream, but did you ever let your mind wander a little bit?
I think just as a junior, I was always like pretty handy. When 12, 13, you sort of enter like the state schoolboy system, playing school footy. Like, not really. Like, I probably, looking back now, was probably always one of the top handful of players like coming through the system in Geelong. But I don't know. I just loved it. I loved every bit of it. Played as much, not only footy, but like basketball, cricket.
Yeah.
Did little athletics and all that sort of
stuff. Keeping the options
just,
open, right?
But sort of when I got to probably 14, 15, that's when it sort of started to get maybe a little bit more realistic. I stopped growing, so I was never going to be a basketballer. Couldn't bat, couldn't bowl, so I wasn't going to be a cricketer. So
just one by one, putting lines through these sports. Can't go there.
Yeah. So,
but
I was
pretty handy with the footy.
Very lucky. Yeah, it was like, as I said, I had some pretty good coaches, one including my dad growing up, kept me pretty level-headed.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I always, as soon as I could sort of realise it was in touch, I think I was, always started to look forward to that dream.
Yeah, that's awesome. When you were younger, and obviously, yeah, kicking the footy around a lot, and there were these family ties. Were you a Geelong supporter from a young age? Like, was that always the case, or did you kind of
Nah,
defect for a little while?
nah, I was an Essendon supporter growing up. So
We all make mistakes.
dad was a Essendon supporter. So even though he had two brothers who played for Geelong, he was very much an Essendon supporter. And me and my brothers, we're all Essendon, we're diehard Essendon supporters actually growing up. So you can imagine being an Essendon supporter growing up in Lara and all the Geelong supporters. We
Yeah.
weren't too, it wasn't, we weren't too fond of the Cats growing up, but that all changed as soon as I got drafted.
So they all came on board pretty quickly as well. There was no,
Well, not
we'll
really.
support the
They just,
Bombers, but we'll support you as well, like that
yeah,
sort of thing.
absolutely. Yeah, no, it was. They've always been Essendon supporters, even Geelong and Brisbane. Always been Bomber supporters from day dot.
That's fair, but at the same time, I guess they still get to enjoy your successes along the way at both clubs. So
Yeah, 100%.
win-win. So as we kind of wade a little bit into the career itself a little bit further, so the Falcons, you mentioned obviously playing at the Falcons there, and do you have any particular memories from that period at all? Like, I mean, obviously you mentioned kind of watching on and seeing the likes of Jimmy and Hodgie, years prior, but in your actual playing time, do you have any particularly fond memories that you look back on from that period?
I just remember. I probably look back at that group and probably look a bit of a missed opportunity. We had Ben Cunnington, Gary Rowan, Jasper Pittard, myself, a couple other guys who got on rookie lists,
Yep.
and then bottom age like Luke Dalhouse. I think there was a couple others. Like we had such a strong group, and it was so. Yeah, I just remember I think we had lost one game in that year, and unfortunately went out in a prelim. But yeah, I just remember learning a lot. Having Gary Buddha-Hocking as your coach, and
He's a gun,
the
right?
sort of player he was, and the knowledge he had, he sort of really molded me into this probably a player who's super offensive. As a junior player, all your talent is offensive unless
Yep.
you're a backman, like you're a midfielder. All your attributes are pretty much in forward to center. And he sort of taught me to, I've got to start running back and helping out my defense and going forward and hitting the scoreboard still. So he's just I just remember him being a really really important part of my development.
And I guess a big part in what helped you become the runner-up in the Morris Medal, as well as getting the TAC Cup Team of the Year along the way.
Yeah, these they're the sort of things you forget about, as you get on. But yeah, look back and I was pretty lucky to play a lot of games and play with a lot of good players the year before. Ran around with Paddy Dangerfield in that year, which was pretty weird that he'd been drafted and by Adelaide, and then
But he was still underage, and
they
school.
let him come back and play, and then we got to the finals and they wouldn't let him play. A bit of a circus, but
Yeah, I
it was
remember
one
hearing
of
about all that. That was all very weird.
yeah. So yeah, that was it was pretty strange back in the day.
Yeah, kind of Wild West stuff, and yeah, things are a little bit different
Yeah.
these days, and it hasn't even been that long when we think about it. Really, there's a
No,
lot that's changed.
it's a completely different league now, and the length of time they spend there. I know they spend a lot more time at their local clubs. Because the coach is obviously coaching the girls program as well. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's a lot different. For better or worse, I don't know. I haven't spent enough
no, that's fair.
time, around the system. It's probably good they get to spend some more time around, senior players and their home club. But then again, like I used to love getting off the bus after school and you know straight to the Falcons, straight in Highton
Yeah,
and hanging around with my mates. But yeah,
there's probably pros and cons to both, right?
yeah, 100%.
So then the AFL career comes along, and you just happen to get drafted at a pretty good time for the Cats, right?
Yeah.
The 2009 draft at Geelong there. What was that like for you in that draft period? And again, obviously you'd had a bit of success there with the Falcons, and I presume you've spoken to a few different parties along the way there. But what was it like in that lead up, and then when you ultimately got picked up in the draft?
Yeah, I went to draft camp and I was probably a little bit overweight, which is like pretty fair, but I was also a 18-year-old kid
Yeah,
who was finishing year 12 and hadn't really picked up a weight or anything like
yeah.
that. Uh, I look back at it now and go, probably I was just a natural footballer and I didn't really give two hoots about what was,
And
the professional side. I wasn't a professional yet. So,
and probably not unusual
uh,
for kids at that age anyway, right? Like your
yeah,
kids.
yeah. So I went to draft camp, probably, yeah, super unfit, sore hips, and then interviewed like with a few clubs. You know, probably like all through my juniors, probably that late first round, early second round pick.
Yeah,
Went to draft camp and you know probably like slipped through to probably end up going pick 40. Remember that period in between draft camp and the draft, I worked super hard to sort of just say, look, I actually mean that I want to get drafted. I want to be a professional, and
yeah,
I was doing sessions with my uncle Damien, who played I think 27 games for the Cats.
yeah.
I was going into the police station where they had their gym and stuff, and I was doing sessions with him like 3 or 4 times a week, like
Very
just
nice.
catching the train from Lara into Geelong and working with him, doing what I had to do, and I think I surprised a few clubs the couple of days before draft camp, with how much my body shape had changed and stuff like that. What went through their minds by letting me slip through. That's their choice. I'm not the tallest player. I wasn't the most
Yeah.
athletically gifted player, so I just I was a footballer.
Did you get a sense for the fact that Geelong, more or less than any other club, was interested? Like, I mean, obviously there were the connections there, and that may have helped up to a point. But did you ever have a feel that them, perhaps more than anyone else, was keen? Although they were sweating on you
Uh,
dropping to a certain point so that they could grab you. Was there any of that sort of feeling at all?
no, never. I never thought. Actually, never really crossed my mind that it'd be. I was getting to stay home. I I think I spoke to him once.
Yeah, okay.
Like I spoke to a couple of teams like numerous times. But yeah, they were definitely one team that I don't know because I was local or they didn't think that I'd get through to their picks or
Yeah,
whatever. Or they had a plan but yeah, whatever it was, I never. I think I spoke to Wellesley maybe once, like a week
yeah, okay.
before the draft. Yeah, I remember him coming over, but yeah, it wasn't. It was pretty informal. It was pretty cruisy, just sort of what their draft plans were and what they saw in me and all that sort of stuff. But it wasn't anything like, all right, if you're here, we're going to take you. I remember hearing from a couple of clubs and they're like, or my manager telling me like, oh, okay, if you get to this pick, like you're gonna go. And then sort of, I
But that
was
didn't happen.
slipping, yeah, I was slipping through the 20s, and I was like, am I even going to get picked up here? Like, I was starting to get pretty
Do you start to
nervous,
panic
but
at that point? Yeah, okay, right.
yeah, absolutely. Like, especially when you're touted as a higher draft pick your whole junior career, and then even like in the papers and stuff like that. As a 18-year-old kid, you're pretty immature, not really recognizing that different things happen. But yeah, I was lucky enough to get through to pick 40.
Yeah, I guess when you hear one thing and suddenly that's not playing out, regardless of where you felt like you might have sat in the pecking order, there's going to be a natural hint of panic that starts to kick in there. So I completely
Absolutely.
understand. But as I mentioned, you came in at a great time. Some early experiences, 2010, and then you had, what was it, 19 games in 2011. You got a Rising Star nomination, and of course featured in a successful finals campaign for the Cats. What was it like for your actual AFL level debut season to result in a premiership?
Yeah, like I think 2010 played like such a big part in 2011. Like I was so close on a couple of occasions to debuting, but it was pretty clear like halfway through that year they said to a few of us young guys like we're going to put you in the gym and get you stronger. It's very unlikely that you're going to debut, but we all I think might have finished fourth in that best and fairest or
Yep.
fifth in that VFL best and fairest in 2010. I just gained so much, and I just tried to sponge up as many players as I could, and players like Shannon Burns like really helped me through those periods, and it was probably we helped each other out that much. Probably ended up in his spot that he'd had for
Yeah,
so
okay.
long the next year. But I think looking back on it now, I know when I was at Brisbane and you're sort of towards the end of your career and you're helping these young guys, you sort of get your kicks out of
Yeah.
helping the younger guys. And even though if you think like, oh, I could really help, you yeah, it can get a bit, you know, you can get down on yourself, but you get your kicks out of it. And I know that's what Burnsy told me. He got kicks out of me
The successes
succeeding.
you were having.
Yeah, so 2011, obviously pretty crazy year. So I was substitute, I think, five of my six games, one of the
Yeah, okay.
first games. So, played three, got dropped, played two, and then played a full game. And then I think he got dropped again. And I didn't come back into the side for, I think, 5 or 6 weeks. So I remember, being pretty disappointed on, being out of the side for that long. But I went back into that BFL, yeah, for that 3 or 4 weeks, whatever it was. And um, yeah, to be honest, it was like probably one of the best patches of footy I'd played, and went back and I came back into a game where we had a few out and we played Adelaide,
Yeah.
and yeah, got an opportunity to play midfield and took it with both hands, and yeah, I never went out of the side after that, which was pretty fortunate because the way it ended.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's never a bad thing to get in during a premiership year, and obviously the club was so strong, regardless of whether we did or didn't win the premiership. Sorry, I said we. I'll let that slip out there. The Geelong supported me, but regardless of the whether it was a successful campaign or not, to get in on a team that is playing at that sort of standard for already quite a few years, like it must be a really humbling sort of thing. But I guess I really do hone in on that point you're talking about. Yeah, taking over Shannon Burns' spot and then being in that similar sort of position when you're at the Lions. And I guess we see it across all professions. It's not just footy, that whole idea of kind of paying it forward, that you kind of soak up so much at the very beginning because that's what you are. You're inexperienced. You're learning. There's so many experienced people around you can learn from, and then you finally get these opportunities later in the career, towards the end of the career, whatever point it happens to be, to finally get to kind of return the favour, I guess, for want of a better phrase. There's that cyclical sort of nature to this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially as like a professional sportsman, like you obviously have a shelf life, so you've got to take it for what it is. I definitely realised that towards the end of my career that I had a lot of knowledge, but I had to pass it on. It's no good just me sitting there
Yeah,
and sulking because I wasn't playing. It was better off having some of these young guys around for dinner or just kicking the ball with them in the kick room, just talking footy. Experiences that I went through. We obviously started playing finals towards the end of my career at Brisbane, and I got to play in some pretty big games at Geelong. So
yeah,
yeah, I think it was important just to pass that, just the experience, and even if they didn't get anything out of it, just the knowledge of what might happen
yeah.
or what they might occur and how they might be able to deal with it. I think is important.
Yeah, I mean, there could be that one moment where someone thinks back on that thing that I was mentioning, and regardless of whether it's you or Hodgie or anyone else that's kind of been there and kind of seen the very top level at the biggest, most important moments, to be able to draw upon that little bit of insight is always going to be valuable. So no, I completely agree with you. Speaking of kind of those biggest moments, how was that 2011 grand final for you? You personally, like, how do you? I mean, obviously successful day, so I think we go away pretty happy from it. But what about you personally? It's such an early point in your career still, and all of a sudden you've claimed a premiership already. Something that there's plenty of players that never go on to achieve, and you did it in well, within your first 20 games.
Yeah, no, it was pretty crazy. Like pretty crazy experience. The whole lead up to it, grand final parade the day before. Just the whole final series. Like I was pretty much on a knife edge the whole time. Being a 20-year-old in their first year, and we had Dan Menzel, Mitch Duncan, myself. We're probably like the three of us were teetering on that outside of the
Yeah,
team, and we unfortunately Dan went down, and it sort of opened the door for myself and Dunks to really
retain your spot.
solidify us.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. But we yeah, just I remember like I was nervous for the grand final. I remember being really nervous for the preliminary final against West Coast because I just knew like if I just felt like if I played a bad game, like they'd bring in someone more experienced
That makes sense.
for a grand final.
Again, it's
And
that youth component that you're talking about.
yeah, look like, and I think my first two touches I got run down, and I was like, oh no, here we go.
It's happening.
Yeah, didn't really adjust to the speed of the game, but we opened that game up pretty quickly, and I ended up having a pretty strong game, and the the lead up to the grand final, I was just so lucky that I had so many players around me that had been there before, and yeah, it just made me feel instant calm.
Yeah,
There
that's
was
good to
no
hear.
Yeah, there was no other than you know probably a little training, because of all the stuff that was going on with Steve Johnson and his
Oh yeah,
knee.
yeah, right. The drama.
The like helicopters above the stadium, seeing how he's going and stuff like that. Other than that, it was pretty normal week, like training wise, captain's runner. I think there was 10,000 people in the stands. I could be making that number up, but I remember just heaps of people being in the stands for our last training run. But yeah, they just all the boys just made sure that us guys are in the team and hadn't been there before. So I think there was four of us had never played in the grand
Yeah.
final before. We just yeah we we deserved to be there, and felt like the preparation, even though it was different, it was the same.
So what does go through your head when you're out there trying to train, trying to prepare for this thing, and there is a helicopter kind of flying overhead and trying to take a peek at everything? And yes, you know that you're not the focus of it, but they're still there. They're still watching.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it I remember having a thought, just like this, pretty crazy that people are spending like some money to send a helicopter to a training ground to see if they can get a glimpse of a player.
Who might have a dodgy
And
leg? Yeah,
yeah, and obviously big personality, great player, and we obviously know what he was able to do in that grand
yeah.
final. So you know, it was just it was nuts. But the grand final parade, being in there with David Wojcinski, obviously been in the car with him, obviously been there and done that, just telling me soak it in, just yeah.
No, that's awesome, mate.
And it was pretty amazing experience leading up to game day.
And so then, obviously, the ecstasy from that day and soaking it all up and enjoying every moment, and then trying to butter up again for 2012 and 13 and 14. What were those next few years like for you before then ultimately the change came where you moved on to Brisbane?
2012, I was injured a fair bit. Didn't have a great preseason. Hurt my wrist. Uh, yeah, I was. Can't remember. There was something going on. I injured myself. I just didn't have a really continual
Yeah,
preseason, which obviously as a 21-year-old that I was, like, you really need that. I had sore hips. I had surgery on my hip. That's right. Um, so that was the first of many, unfortunately. But yeah, I just couldn't get going. I had a like pretty strong like back end to that year.
yeah,
Yeah, but we we I think we finished seventh maybe or sixth. We lost the
yeah. It sounds about right.
yeah, and then we lost the Freo in that final. I think that was at the G.
Yeah, yeah. I remember
And
being there for that one.
yeah. So yeah, we obviously finished fifth or sixth, and in that elimination final, and I think we kicked a lot of points that day, and been pretty disappointed, like to go from what you experienced that last final series to bowing out, first round of it. The next year was obviously pretty disappointing, especially with like majority of the list was still together.
Yeah,
Uh, and 2013, really good preseason. Probably the best year of footy I had personally. As a team, I thought probably the best team in it that year. We
yeah. It
obviously
didn't quite
20
work
points
out.
up. Yeah, we had that 20 point lead at three-quarter time in that preliminary final against the Hawks. But yeah, we obviously that whole final series was pretty crazy. Losing to Freo at home that first final, and then being 40 odd points down, I think, against Port in that semi.
Yeah, and chasing him down and
And then the prelim. being in that position that we were. But it's something that sticks with me a little bit. But at the end of the day, it was pretty disappointing end to that year, and especially those games against Hawthorn, like every single one seemed to be just amazing, and that was just another one. Um, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm speaking for
Sorry
many,
to bring
many.
up. Sorry to bring up bad memories.
Just cut me deep, and no, that's all right. But I guess again, still as a guy who's early in his career at this point, still like that collection of experiences from 2011 to 13, and kind of seeing the ups and downs of how even a final, like yes, the team was very successful through that time, but seeing what the ups and downs look like and how quickly things can change would still be a really valuable experience. Again, kind of cycling back to that point of what you've been able to share in your time at the Lions, like that.
Yeah.
Those sorts of experiences are invaluable still.
Yeah, absolutely, and sort of knowing what you have to do and the extra little things that you have to do as a group to get to where you want to go. And 2013, well, what 5 or 6 minutes away from
Yeah.
having another crack at Fremantle, and unfortunately that didn't happen. But we got on with it the next year, and I think we had another good preseason that year, and we were okay in 2014.
Yeah.
We but I had back surgery start of the year, come back for 10 games I think it was, and then might have even been 9, and then I think it was the second last round of the year. I was driving home, and I sort of getting that numb feeling in my leg and that tingling in my leg, and I was a late withdrawal for the last game of the year, and then for the next 2 weeks I was just sort of trying to get up for these finals, and I just had no power in my leg, and the surgery that I'd had in early in the year had sort of just had failed, so I had to go in for a second back surgery, and unfortunately missed that game. And I remember watching it on the couch, and I was sore, and we were absolutely running down North Melbourne in that semi-final, and just didn't get there in the end. But yeah, it was pretty like disappointing end to what at that time I sort of didn't even really recognise what was going on. So yeah, it all happened pretty quickly after that.
Yeah, so I guess at that point, at the end of 2014, the decision was made to move on. And was it always? I mean, one of the reasons you cited at the time was lifestyle and personal changes, and obviously we'll kind of touch on some of those aspects shortly. But did it seem obvious that like Brisbane or like interstate had to be the destination?
Not really. It just sort of how it presented itself. I had my management group and a particular person up there that I felt like if everything hit the fan, I was able to lean on them a bit, and
That's handy.
that was pretty much the decision. And looking back on it now, it was pretty rash. And as a young kid, you just think you got to do something. But I convinced myself that that's what I wanted to do. But look, it is what it is now. And
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, I had a good career at Brisbane as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess when you realised that Brisbane was going to be the destination, you could, obviously you take a look at the ladder and you kind of know where they've been and where they had kind of, or I guess what challenges they'd faced in the years prior. What was that like for you, kind of setting your expectations, given where you've been and the success that Geelong had had, and then you're coming to a team that's, in the nicest way possible, kind of on the polar opposite end of the ladder at that point. What was that like for you? And I mean, like, how did you kind of set yourself for that challenge, I guess, that comes with it?
Yeah, I guess I was dealing with like so much stuff, and like obviously a lot of everyone knows, like I was dealing like with the gambling issues and
Yeah.
all that. We can talk about that later, but um, I went up there and I was going, all right, this is a chance to reset on that front and started a new team. And you know like I had a lot of stuff going on, and they took me on, and I'll always treasure them for that. And
It was just good to have a club to play footy with, despite
yeah,
everything else that
and
was going on.
yeah, 100%. And like it wasn't like Geelong were great. Like they're amazing for me. They I had a couple contract offers from them. Do you want to like live like in Melbourne and drive down? Do you like want a 1 year contract and see what happens? Like it wasn't like Geelong were like get out the door.
Yeah.
Um, Contrary to what some people believe, but
Well, let's shoot that down now. Yeah, for sure.
but yeah, it was like it was pretty like supportive environment like from both fronts. And when I got the trade done, uh, like I was able to just get on with it. And footy's footy at the end of the day. It's just it's your job. And I just had to, for like the addiction side of stuff, I sort of need to get out of that environment.
Yeah, I mean, there's this human level that exists well beyond the footy component, and that's far more important. So, I mean, at the time, obviously, when you left, and this is now me kind of recalling some of my thoughts and feelings at the time. Like, I was disappointed to see you go. Like, I loved you as a player and loved everything you were achieving at the club. And at first, like, now I hadn't kind of caught on to any ideas that the club had tried to ship you out or anything like that. But I was like, oh, damn it, like. And you form as a fan, you form these attachments to players, especially if they've been big parts of obviously really important moments to you as an individual, which is kind of watching on as you won the flag in 2011, those sort of things. But it was as you kind of started to speak about the addiction and those sorts of things years after the fact that I was able to kind of go back and reflect on that and go, well, like, I mean, that makes all the sense in the world, right? Like, you've got to do what's good for you as an individual, and that's more important than any club. And it's awesome to hear that Geelong was obviously trying to offer ways to keep you there and be able to support you through what you were going through, but at the same time that you found what was right for you, I guess.
Yeah, and like I'll never like speak ill of what Wellesley and Barmy, Steve Hocking, all those guys upstairs. They were great. Dave Johnson, meeting with me, and then Matthew Stokes, like catching up with him, like didn't even like try and change my mind with anything. Just really supportive. Um, and then as you said, like you go to Brisbane and obviously completely down different, but yeah, different group, like really
It's an
young
opportunity
group.
too.
Yeah, different like younger group. The weather's obviously a lot better.
Yeah.
Um, I got somehow I just started like deciding that it was a good time to cover my body in tattoos. And it's completely different.
And I guess with that and being such an inexperienced team, and they haven't seen a great deal of success at that point in time. Obviously, there's still memories of kind of the early 2000s and a few people about the club that know of the successes or were part of those successes, but certainly not on the playing list side, no one that's really been there and done that, and you would have been one of the few that were. Was that opportunity? I mean, we spoke about before, and the experience and the knowledge you get to share. Was that kind of an opportunity for you to kind of step up and maybe even potentially good for you, and considering everything you were going through, maybe a good opportunity for you because you're kind of suddenly you've become one of the more experienced people in the room and have these really awesome insights you can share with people.
Yeah, definitely. And like I guess I've been around like successful coaches, successful players, and you try and put that together with some off-field experiences together and try and help the group as much as we can. We dealt with a lot of injuries and a lot of other stuff at Brisbane in those first 2 years before Fags and David Noble came along. And even though we were pretty poor off, I'm pretty poor on the field, like some of the friendships you make, like I still have them now. And it is what it is. Like Leopard did everything he could to try and hold that team together. I think at one stage we had like 20 odd blokes in rehab. There was just
There's only so much you can do, right?
Yeah, 100%. So those first 2 years obviously disappointing in terms of only winning like three games each year or whatever it was. And but Fags comes along and David Noble comes along out of successful environments and completely changed the course of that team.
Was it challenging for you? So, 2020 was your final year in the AFL there, and things were starting to turn around for the Lions. Was it a hard decision for you at that point? I mean, I don't think retirement for any players usually, there's pros and cons to all of it. But as you start to see the trajectory, you've kind of been there with them at the at some of their lowest points, and then you're starting to see the ship turn around. Did that make it harder to step away?
Oh
Or what if?
yeah, yeah. It like pretty hard. Like my last game was 2019 in a semi final, and we're 2 minutes like you know, um, GWS kick a goal with 2 minutes to go to win the game. Like
Yeah.
we're one kick away from playing in a prelim in 2019.
And from
Uh,
there, who knows, right?
yeah, like you never know. Like uh, we 2020, I had my third surgery on my back, so I was behind the eight ball already. But I don't know. To be honest, like I was out of the team. I sort of wasn't really close at all. But
Yeah, okay.
yeah, so it sort of made it easy. Like you don't like I've been a part of my life for so long, 11 years. But you can sort of, if you're realistic about it, you can probably see it coming from a mile away. But
Yeah, makes sense.
yeah, it just I was thankful, like pretty thankful to have a career that got to play over 130 games and 11 years in the system. You present that to any 18-year-old
Oh,
old
you
kid
take
that
it, right?
gets
Any day of the
drafted.
week.
You're taking that straight away. So yeah, it's obviously sad to be leaving the environment, but excited to enter a new chapter in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any young kid that's cycling back to your own youth and kicking the footy around and just hoping to play for the seniors locally, to be able to tell that kid that, hey, you got to play in a premiership, you got to play at Geelong and Brisbane, and make heaps of great mates and play, as you said, over 130 games. Like, you take that any day of the week. If someone told me I get that opportunity, I would it would have fallen off. As too late for that now. But anyway, comparing the time, and I guess there are differences in terms of your level of experience at both clubs, but were there any kind of obvious differences, similarities, especially, I guess, if we compare your time at Geelong to some of those more recent years with Fags, where both clubs are achieving success there? What sort of similarities and differences do you see between them
Probably like when I got
outside
to
of the win-loss
Geelong.
ledger, obviously?
Yeah. Geelong were like way more mature group. They'd been together for a long time. So when I came into that group, I was like, fresh blood, fresh injection of youth.
Yeah,
Where Brisbane, we sort of like gone through the hard times together, and we sort of grew together as a group. Not too probably dissimilar to what those boys did in like 2003,
yeah,
2004, 2005, when they were playing VFL all together at Geelong. So that was probably the big difference. Similar like work ethic from the guys who are the best players in the competition. Like they're the best players in the competition because they work the hardest. There wasn't anyone like you'd say I'll watch Jimmy Bartel or Joel Selwood, Joel Corey
yeah.
Enright. Like that list just keeps going on and on.
Yeah,
But
but
uh,
we'll forget someone if
that
we're not careful.
yeah, they work hard. They work hard on the small things. They work hard on the big things. Recovery, diet, all those things that made them 1% better than the player they were playing on.
Yeah,
And they did that consistently over 13, 14 years, and they had these amazing careers. I look at Brisbane now, and I'm looking at like Dane Zorko and Lockie Neal. Um, you know, even now, like Harris Andrews is young, but he does everything right,
yeah.
and it makes them the sort of players they are because they do the 1% things right, and that's why they're the players they
That's
are.
what the
That's why
best
they're
clubs
all
do.
That's why they're all Australians, and that's why they drag the rest of their teammates along.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and yeah, there's certainly these through lines, I guess, between both clubs and in their kind of successful periods, and obviously who knows what is still to come for that Brisbane team. That I guess there's still plenty of faces there that you know quite well. Obviously, you just mentioned a few of them. You did actually just recently play pre-game for the Brisbane Hawthorn game, so did you actually get an opportunity to catch up with a few of the boys while everyone was in town?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a pretty weird experience. Well, playing. We started probably 3 or 4 hours before their game, but by the end of the game, they're all out there having a look, and it was pretty funny. you know, two
Because you've
years
just had your
before.
face kicked in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, 2 years before that, you know, you're seeing these guys every single day, and then it all sort of changes pretty quickly. But yeah, it was good to see him. I went to their captain's run on the Saturday, and you
Oh,
know,
awesome.
said hello to all the coaches and all the staff members that I hadn't seen. Obviously, due to COVID as well, I haven't
Yeah.
been able to travel, but yeah, being able to see some people that you haven't seen for a long time was great.
And I guess on that COVID note, so retirement during a pandemic, what was that
Yeah.
like? Or I guess coming to that conclusion, and you know, you had accomplished some really awesome things in your time at both clubs, and I guess the impact of COVID around the world and I guess Queensland was doing a bit better than the rest of Australia at the time when it came to the COVID situation. But what was that like for you? Did it mute things a little bit? Was it just a bit
Yeah,
weird?
yeah, yeah. It actually probably gave me an opportunity to catch up because I'd missed
Yeah.
that pre-season with my back surgery, and then we had that 6 week break. It gave me an opportunity to sort of like, all right, like let's have a because I missed out round one. I wasn't even close to playing round one, but then um, the game got called off round two, and then we went into that recess for 6 or 7 weeks,
Oh yeah,
whatever
yeah,
it was. And like in that time, I just try to do as much as I could and sort of try to give myself the best opportunity to try and come back into that team in 2020. And it was strange. Like you talk to any player that probably on the outer in that period, it was pretty horrible to be honest.
like a why am
Uh,
I even bothering with this? Like what's the point sort of thing?
yeah, like Brisbane, like I loved hanging out with the boys and but because you had to look after like the senior squad, couldn't only you could only really be around them like at training. Like there was no like in like mingling like through the
Yeah,
club.
I'm with
Like
you.
it was completely different environment. So
Keep your
yeah,
distance.
you're rocking like in small groups. It was, and you're not even close to playing what you want to be doing. It was, yeah, it took a toll on a lot of players mentally, and there's some guys now that I was in that group with are back on AFL lists, and I'm just so happy because we were we were dealing with so much, as a small little group that was not playing, and but still working pretty hard just in case
Yeah.
our opportunity came. Um, yeah, it was a weird time, but yeah, we got through it, and it sort of probably adjusted us to what life might look like on the other side of footy.
Yeah, and then I guess the retirement itself, and coming to that conclusion and making that decision. What was that like? Again, with the COVID layer over everything.
Yeah, I was. Well, to be honest, I was never going to get another contract. Didn't really look like there was going to be anything present itself elsewhere. So
So were
yeah, I
you
was just
retire
like,
before they delisted, that sort of thing.
absolutely.
It makes sense.
So no, I was like, it was, you could probably hang around until February, March, try and keep fit, do all these things, just in case something presents itself, like
Yeah,
in those extra list spots. But yeah, yeah, it was like me and my manager talked about it. It was time to probably get on with life and what that looked like, and yeah, decide to head down to Tasmania.
yeah. And so, what does that look like these days? So you are down in Tassie, as we mentioned before. You played the pre-game for the Brisbane Hawthorn game, and yeah, let's ignore the face incident there, the kick to the face. But you're still playing regular footy. But what does the rest of the day to day look like in this post AFL life that you're leading?
Yeah, it's pretty. I've got a pretty cruisy job. I'm pretty lucky that I work with some indigenous kids and some kids at the footy club that I
Yeah.
work with. Just helping them out, bit of like mentoring and
Oh,
making
great.
sure they're going to school and stuff like that, which is great. Learning a lot about the indigenous community down here because before I came down here, didn't know a lot. So I'm really thankful that the community down here has embraced me and I'm able to learn heaps. Then yeah, footy, like it's fun now. Like it's something that I get to lead the train, Tuesday and Thursday nights and rock up every time on the same day, on a same day, same time. Saturday
A
at
bit
two
more
o'clock,
predictable.
and get to play and have some fun with it, and try and help some of these guys who might not be aspiring to be AFL footballers, but just be the best players they can be. And
Yeah.
it sort of gives me a chance to sort of work on my my coaching development and seeing if that's a path I want to head down,
Yeah. Okay.
or
Cool.
something else. So yeah.
And I guess like focusing on that indigenous side, we are just freshly, as of when we talk, we're just fresh from Sir Doug Nicholas round, and you obviously mentioned working with local indigenous children and people. That you didn't know a lot about that particular community beforehand. What makes this community different to others that you've subtle differences? What is it about the local group that you're with now that maybe stands out compared to, and I don't necessarily like making one better than the other or any of that sort of thing, but what makes them different to others that you've worked with
I like just the history down
or
here
lived
is
with, I should
like,
say.
yeah, is pretty catastrophic and pretty sad, and there's a lot of sadness that comes with the story down here. But I look at these people down here, and the mob down here, the Palawa people. They're so strong. They're rebuilding their culture. They're rebuilding their language. From
Great.
not a lot. Yeah, so to be able to not play a part, but be able to witness it sort of firsthand, like some of these kids and people that I deal with in the community, just being able to listen to them and see how they're doing it, and it's really inspiring to keep learning, making me learn my journey and where I come from.
I mean, and I could be speaking out of turn here. Like you say that you're not necessarily a part of it, but I mean, with I guess the figure and the status that you bring and the experiences you've had, like you are a positive force for good that's coming into this community, and I feel like that can only be a great thing, regardless of kind of the connections you do or don't have from years prior. Like I feel like that can only be a good thing, right?
Yeah, it's like you try and be a positive role model and positive influence to whoever really wants to listen at the end of the day. But yeah, it's good. It's a good place to live. There's a good indigenous community down here. I'm really lucky to live in Hobart and be down here, and enjoy my time, enjoy listening to stories of the people, and where they come from, some of the traditions, some of the cultural stuff. Like it's I'm really lucky to be able to walk on this land. I recognise it's not my land, and I'm doing a job that thousands of years ago that their mob would have done. But
Yeah.
yeah, if I can play like a small role, then that's what I'm doing,
It's all
and
worth
I'll
it, right?
continue to do. Yeah, absolutely.
No, good to hear. Um, well, obviously you're in Hobart at the moment. We touched on very briefly the weather before. How are you settling into that weather? Because it's, I mean, we mentioned obviously how much better things were weather-wise up on the up in Queensland there, and now you've gone again the polar opposite. Perhaps arguably you'll have better perspective than I. Maybe even worse than the weather can get in Geelong. How are you settling into that?
Yeah, yeah, it can get a bit dicey down here. It's starting to get pretty cold, especially those nights where train 7:30 at night. It's There's been a couple of mornings that we've woken up in the last week or so that the snow's been on the mountain, so
Oof.
that's starting to get a bit chilly then. So no, look, I dealt with it last year. I'm sure I can do it again this year.
We'll just call training off for a snow day, all right?
Yeah, that's one assistant coach I can try and pull those strings.
Now, outside, and obviously, you mentioned doing some awesome community work there in your time down in Hobart. But one other thing that you've touched on, this goes back to the gambling side of it. You've been speaking out a lot post-career about the gambling troubles and difficulties that you had there. You had the Addicted to the Game podcast that you about 40 episodes. We were discussing before the show about 40 episodes of that, and you've been talking about that, and it's been a fantastic platform to kind of spread your message around the challenges that you faced and that others face, and how people may or try to overcome those. Wading into some of the difficulties that you had through the years, I Where do you feel like it first began for you?
Yeah, I've been pretty pretty open about my journey with gambling and
Which is
starting
fantastic, by the way.
yeah, very 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 young, and just being around it. But that's just Australian culture, really.
Yeah.
Like if you go to the races, you take your kids along. Big race meetings. The family might get together. Melbourne Cup, Caulfield Cup, Cox Plate.
Yeah.
The family might come around. You put on a couple of bucks, and you ask mum, dad, grandma, whoever.
And you reckon
Can
that's
put
kind
a
of where it
couple.
started for you?
Yeah, like definitely like the love of like horse racing, definitely.
Yeah.
And then you sort of go from there. Growing up, my group of friends, and we all talk about it now, and like they have no. I guess they'd have no issues about me talking about it now, but we're at high school, and looking at the form guide and all that sort of stuff. It sort of really grew, between 15, 16, 17, and then I get drafted and have a little bit more disposable income, and we probably all with a bit
Fall
of
into the trap a bit.
downtime. Yeah, absolutely. And uh, mine it just became everything like outside of footy for me. And in the end of the day, I was pretty much a gambler who played football
Yeah.
to fuel everything that was going on. And I think like the podcast is still up, and if
Yeah,
you
it is.
really
Yep.
want to go in depth and have a look, have a listen to some of the stuff that I dealt with in a bit more detail. You can jump on and have a listen on Spotify. And
Yeah, I definitely don't want to steal all your thunder here.
yeah, no, there's just a lot more detail that went into it's hard to explain in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's sort of come out the other side, and I think the big thing for us, like we've never like ever said that people shouldn't gamble. Like we've got no issues. Like if you can, every Saturday put $50 into a betting account and win, lose, draw, whatever,
Yeah.
you can do that without any issues at all. Whatever, that's fine. We're like all I ever tried to do was just be sort of an advocate for people that, you know, hundreds and hundreds of gambling ads that get
Yeah.
shown every week has a massive effect on people, and like continues to have an effect on me. And I know there's people I know who haven't gambled for like years and just have just given in. Like that's the beast of an addiction. Like
Yeah.
it
It's
never
always
really
there. Yeah.
yeah, it never leaves. But when you're constantly getting like ad after ad saying, if you put in 100, we'll put in 100, or even like ads that don't even relate to gambling, they're the ones that we had a real issue with, as me and my brothers were like, if you're going to talk about gambling, pump up your product. Don't
Yeah.
don't make a joke or whatever. But that's they're playing within the rules like at the
Yeah.
moment.
It's
So
marketing.
yeah, so we I had no issues, and like I'm pretty lucky now that I can sit there with my friends, and if they want to have a bet, like that's fine. Like I'm never gonna ever tell anyone what to do when it
Yeah.
comes to gambling. Like they know my story. Like they know how to be respectful around me. They know how to act around me. So yeah, it's been a fair while now. Like, and yeah, well, I'll just manage it day to day like any other. Like at the end of the day, it's like chronic illness. Like, and you've got to manage it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just manage it in day to day life. Have good days, have bad days. It just is what it is.
Yeah, and I guess maybe putting words in your mouth, but I'd imagine when you are with those friends and they do go to put a bet on, whether it's big or small or otherwise, the fact that you're there and or like they know you and they know your story, that potentially on its own just potentially helps save them in that sense of going down the same path. Like that, it's unfortunate people have to learn from the unfortunate circumstances of others, but I mean that's in this particular instance that's the state that we're in, and I guess I mean again through the podcast and then just with those groups of friends, you're doing so much good to hopefully minimize the number of people that can fall into the trap.
Yeah, I've had people reach out and say that, the way that myself and my brothers, spoke about it, and I think I know it's my story, but my brothers gave a perspective of family members who are probably like, because you're so self-absorbed in your addiction, like
Yeah.
like having the family members' point of view is like so important. That's why I had my mum come on and speak like what it did to her, and why I had my dad on as well. Like it's really important to get the perspective of people outside the addiction, because you're in your own little bubble when
Yeah.
whether it be gambling, alcohol, drugs, shopping, eating. It doesn't matter what addiction. It's all about you at the end of the day, and I
Yeah,
just
seeing the forest from the trees
yeah
and all that.
yeah. So it's important that my brothers gave that perspective, and to be honest, we probably had more people reach out about like really glad that we got to hear his perspective of your brothers and what it does to family members outside of that, because the ripple effects is pretty wide.
Yeah, no, you don't necessarily see the forest from the trees, and it can be a really challenging spot, not only for the addicted person, again, regardless of the addiction, but those surrounding them too. So
Yeah, absolutely.
hopefully the show and everything you've put out there around that and other platforms as well is continuing to do good for people as they discover the show, as they discover anything that's kind of been written about you and your experiences. It's really awesome stuff, mate.
No, thank you.
Now, a hard pivot as we start to wind things down, a few lighter ones. Who do you see as, and I know obviously the ties are there with Brisbane as well, but we've got a bit of a Geelong bias here on the show.
Yeah.
Who's the greatest cat of all time in your opinion?
Well, all time. Well,
Could be someone you've played with. There could be that little bit of bias, but
no, I'll probably Gary Ablett Jr. for me. Like
yeah,
I've only seen highlights of like certain other players, so being able to see what Gaz was able to do, like
yeah,
firsthand in my first year, and what he, growing up, like they're the sort of players I was watching. So,
and then obviously got the opportunity to play against him as well at the Gold.
Yeah.
He was at the Gold Coast.
Yeah, so for me, probably him.
And obviously there's a bit of love for both the Cats and the Lions, but is there anyone on the Cats list that you look at in particular that, in terms of like that's either a favourite player or like an up and coming player that you really like the way they go about it?
I like the way Close goes about it. Yeah, I really.
Do you
like
see a little bit of yourself in the way he plays? There's
a little bit. I think might be a little bit there.
Certainly knows his way around the contest and moves through it quite well.
Yeah.
Like I personally saw you doing very well.
Yeah, so maybe a little, slightly different body shapes and stuff like that. But him. And then for Brisbane, I have real affinity for Noah Answorth.
Yep.
I think, not similar in any way, but just sort of the injuries he went through as a young kid, and then coming into the system, then getting injured again. What he's been able to do again, like if his body stays together, like he's got a long career in front of him, because he's got everything in that he needs to be a great defender in the AFL.
No, that's awesome on both accounts, and make sure listeners, viewers, keep an eye out for both players. Obviously, if you're a Geelong supporter, you know Brad Close pretty well by now, but keep an eye out for Noah Answorth as well. Well, Bundy, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing this journey so far. And you've done some incredible things as a Cats fan. I'm so thankful for what you contributed to the team in your time at the Cats, and congratulations on a fantastic career at both the Cats and the Lions, and again on what you're doing now. You're doing some incredible things, and well, long may that continue.
Thank you. I really appreciate having me on.
And if people want to kind of reach out and get in touch, as you mentioned, people have done previously, where would they be best to go?
You can find me on Twitter. My handle's at Bundy ATTG. So you can find me there.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks so much for sharing this time and this journey so far, mate.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And Cats fans, remain strong. Geelong strong. Damn it. I'll see you next time.